It's over, so how would the board like to proceed?
I'd like to make a motion that, one at a time, that we appoint Ms. Laurie White to the Affordable Housing Committee,
Term ending 6/30/15.
6/30/15.
Second.
Is there a motion and a second to appoint Ms. White to the Affordable Housing Committee for a term ending June 30, 2015? And we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous.
I make a motion that we appoint Laurie White to the Conservation Commission for a voting member with a term ending 6/30/16.
A voting member?
We only have one applicant for the commission.
It says here we have 2 alternate positions.
Correct. There are two alternates and a full vacancy.
But we only have one applicant.
One applicant. So there's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to
So what do we
appoint Ms.
do?
White to a full vacancy, the term ending June 30, 2016.
Good.
Any discussion on the motion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Unanimous.
Double duty.
All right, we do have an applicant for the Commission on Disabilities, but that individual is not available this evening, and so we will reschedule that interview. We have for the Historic Districts Commission, Barbara Milligan. Thank you for sticking with us this evening.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
She's congenial.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to be a member of the commission?
I feel very strongly about historic preservation. I've been in the field of historic house management for the majority of my 30-year career, managing, interpreting, and maintaining historic houses. And I feel that historic preservation plays an important role in Falmouth, both because it enhances our quality of life, and it's a very important tool in our local economy. So I'm at the point in my life where I have a little bit more time than I used to, and I'm looking to become civically engaged, and this seems like the right path to start.
Questions from the board? Mr.
One
Murphy?
question. What's your thoughts on alternative products?
On what?
I actually take a sort of a big picture view about historic preservation because I've been on the money end of it now for the last 20 years. So I understand that, sometimes you have to compromise. So I think that there is a place for alternative products. I think within reason.
Enough for me.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Barbara, there's been an intent to merge the Historic District Commission and the Historical Commission, and, there are some state statutes that affect both of those, and I don't know where we are with that. But I wondered if you knew that, and if you would see that that would be valuable to be able to do both in terms of, looking at what the Historical Commission looks at, and then actually dealing with the district.
I have heard that rumor, and I do think that there are some models from other communities that I've been researching. So I think that it would be, I would like to see historic preservation play a larger role in the town in terms of planning and economic development. And I think having one strong entity that can advocate for that would probably be helpful.
Any other questions?
Do you think there might be some other ways that the Historical Commission and the Historic District Commission can advance our designation as a Preserve America community? I mean, I don't know what we do
Well, we
to
are-
capitalize on that, but.
We are a Preserve America
Yeah.
community. There's just no money, there's no funding in that program. But I certainly think that preservation can play a bigger role in terms of getting our cultural district assignment from the state and in cultural tourism and all kinds of things. I think it plays an important role in our town and can play an even larger role in economic development and planning, and should.
Okay. Great.
Any other
It's a
questions?
no-brainer for me.
Just quickly, how long have you been a resident of Falmouth?
Almost, well, over 18 years now.
I mean, I was just going through here and I thought I'll just ask her. I could have gotten it.
Yeah,
But
quite a while.
Yeah, quite a while. Okay, thank you.
And thank you for the resume.
Certainly.
And thank you for all your service to the town as executive
My pleasure.
director of Highfield, I must say. That's wonderful town-owned property on the hill.
How would the board like to proceed?
I would vote with appointment of Barbara Milligan to the Historic Districts Commission, term ending 6/30/18.
As an
That's
alternate,
the
That's the
alternate,
Is that the alternate? I'm
we
sorry.
have 2 full vacancies.
6/30/17 then.
full member.
Yep, full
So,
member.
as a
Second.
full member, June 30, 2017, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous. Congratulations.
Thanks, Barbara.
And for the Human Services Committee, Annie Saginaw.
Hi, good evening. I'm Annie Saganek.
Love that microphone.
Can you hear? No?
We can hear, that's for the folks at home more than
Okay,
us.
sorry. I don't have my resume, I'm
That's
sorry.
all, that's
No,
all
we
right.
have-
Read
Tell
that in the
us,
application.
tell us a little bit about
I
yourself.
did come to Falmouth in 1974. I'm a Navy brat. I don't know if that counts, I'm only kidding. I'm the executive director of the Falmouth Housing Authority. And in that capacity, I often interface with the Falmouth Human Services. And I've come to respect Karen Kadera and her staff a great deal. I think they do a tremendous service to the town. Human Services has always been something that's been sort of near and dear to my heart. I think as Falmouth, well, let me step back. I grew up here, so I have an anecdotal and a historical perspective about how the town has changed. You know, you all are well aware of the significant demographic changes that we're undergoing. You know, I have 2 young kids. My husband and I have a kindergartner and a 5th grader. And so we see things that I think maybe some of the other folks that volunteer their time, predominantly they're retired and they're older. We have a presence in the schools. And so, and as a housing advocate and professional, I see a lot as well. So I'm interested in giving back. And I think it's a really important town department, and it's somewhat, they're sort of unsung heroes. It's not the flashiest department. I mean, I think you guys are great, but, you know, it's human services. It's not sexy. It's not. It isn't. But it's necessary, so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions from the board?
I don't have a question, but just a statement that I think that you see a connection there between your work at the Housing Trust and Human Services, because they kind of do go together. So I think that they would be mutually beneficial, not only to you as an individual, but to what you can accomplish.
Yes, I agree.
Kevin?
Just for future reference, which department is sexy?
It must
I
be
think the
the
zoning
hour.
board of appeals think they are really something.
I was trying to add a little levity
I
here
know,
at
no,
this
I
hour,
appreciate
right?
it. At 11 o'clock, I'll giggle about
Yeah, that's
anything.
all right. I'm very familiar with your passion for affordable housing. I think they go well together.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? All right, how would the board like to proceed? Thank you.
I would move appointment of Annie Saganek to the Human Services Committee. I think full term ending June 30th, 2016 is what we have available.
We do, we have 4 vacancies. One of them is June 30, 2016. So we have a motion
It's a
Second.
number of years from
and a
now.
second. A motion and a second to appoint Ms. Saganek to a term expiring June 30, 2016. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? It's unanimous. Congratulations. And for the Substance Abuse Commission, Sharon Sodixon?
Oh, yeah.
Did I get that? Thank you. I'm not always good with names, so,
It's okay, you did well.
thank you.
Yes, I'm Sharon Sodixon, and I have had the privilege of being the coordinator for the Falmouth Prevention Partnership up into this past July, so it was about 3 years, almost 3 years. And as part of my role, I was a member of the Falmouth Substance Abuse Commission, but a non-voting member. And so when I knew that I was moving forward to another position, still in substance abuse, I now work for Gosnell. I decided to put my application in, and that was in July, practically the day I left the partnership. I love the work that I do. I have a great passion for the field of substance abuse and mental health. I am a person in long-term recovery, and that, which means that I've had almost 13 years of sobriety. And I have, from the work, from the partnership, I really believe so much in the collaboration of the many sectors within our community to understand the disease of addiction, to be able to support our youth and families, and in all aspects. And by being part of the Substance Abuse Commission, I have that opportunity to support that. By working just with the partnership, it was all youth, not that we didn't deal with families, and we've done a lot of wonderful other things, providing the benefit of medical return box at the police station. I mean, there's lots, they were much more open-minded, but it was always geared predominantly towards the youth. And in the Substance Abuse Commission, there's a lot of other aspects of this whole issue. And I really would want to be part of that, and we would continue being part of that, so.
Questions from the board?
I just sort of have a question and comment. I know it was a disappointment not to have the second round of the grant funding.
That was one of the reasons I loved
And,
it.
but I know there's also some things going on at
Yes.
the regional level, too, that are bringing, everyone together.
Yeah?
So how, well, this doesn't really affect, in a sense, your appointment now, but do you see that the Substance Abuse Commission will be able to pick up and go forward with what they're doing even without that funding?
The Falmouth Substance Abuse Commission, it's much broader in its focus. It was, 5 years ago, it was looked at that they wanted, from the results from the community surveys, that they wanted to be able to expand their youth understanding. The real process of the Drug-Free Communities grant that they received for 5 years was really about community capacity building. That was the #1 goal. And I will tell you that I feel very confident that we did that in the last 5 years. We built a lot of collaborations within the 12 sectors of this community. And within that, in bringing that, and also the other second part was, was changing the use rate of what's happening. And from the results of the survey that has happened. But, it's not always just the work we did. It's a lot of things. And I think the Substance Abuse Commission as a whole also can just play just as a vital role in going forward in any regionalization if that's where they want to go. But we're really about supporting Falmouth. And if the Prevention Partnership goes into a more regional viewpoint, we still have Falmouth to take care of. So, and there's lots of other work to be done. The whole stigma of addiction is not a pretty one, and that, personally, that's what I have a passion for, is really wanting to change that stigma.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Other questions?
I wanted you to speak up, so, your question was was good, and because I wanted you to express to this board the work that you had done
Yeah.
and how successful you were, and that it was over a long term. It wasn't as if it was just 12 months
No.
and that was it, but a very hard worker, and you did. So the question was good that you opened up on that.
Thank you. I had great support. Falmouth Human Services was 100% behind everything. It's the only full-time staff person for almost 3 years, other than, it was just a privilege. I don't know any other way to share it, and that's why I started it that way, to be of service.
I have a question. We have 4 vacancies on the or 3 now vacancies
Yeah.
on the Human Services Committee, and there are 5 vacancies on the Substance Abuse Commission. And there has been a lot of discussion about addressing some of these vacancies on other committees, and you heard probably earlier tonight about the Historical Commission and the Historic Districts Commission. Do you think there's opportunity here, perhaps, overlap between what Human Services does and what Substance Abuse Commission does, and perhaps merging those committees?
To some degree, mental health is such a big part of the disease of addiction, to such a degree. And in that respect, I see how they could merge. But, then you're suggesting it all being the mental health part of what's going on.
Yep.
And really what's happening so much with our youth is really the use of opiates, and what's happening is really, I don't know so much if that really is an issue for mental health at this point. I'm not at all in a perspective to be able to give you that kind of an answer. I don't have that kind of background, but I do know, as being in admissions at Gosnell, that 70% of the calls are young people, and they've picked up, and it's anywhere from 18 to 24, 25 that are a lot of the telephone. And I mean, those results are open to the community anyway through Gosnell, but it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
A little bit, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, how would we like to proceed? Thank you. We
I
have,
will, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you were
well, we
gonna-
have 5 vacancies. And in fact, even if we do make this appointment, I don't know if there's enough members to even have a quorum in any meetings, but it's a step in the right direction, I think.
Well, I will move to appoint Sharon Sodexon to the Substance Abuse Commission.
And I second.
What would the term be? We
Oh,
have
it's,
terms
15.
ending,
16?
16, I think
So-
it says.
this is the term ending June 30, 2016?
Yes.
Okay.
Till 2016.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? It's unanimous. Congratulations, thank you. And the Zoning Board of Appeals. David Haddad.
Save the sexiest board for last.
Thank you for your patience.
As I think everybody, but maybe Ms. Moffett probably knows me, David Haddad. I'm associate member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I was before you for a full voting member, I think, June of 2012, when you appointed Patty Johnson. Since I've been an associate member, I think I've missed one meeting. So I take the position serious. Even though I am an associate member, I think I've been a voting member on just about all the hearings, so I've got a fair amount of experience with it, so.
All right. Any
Let me
questions
just
from
say,
the board?
I want to just thank, obviously, the zoning administrator, Suri Budrow, here, and Scott and Matt McNamara, my fellow board members, 4 hours into this.
And
They
it
must
is
like
worth,
me.
it is worth noting that the chair and we have a member of the ZBA and the administrator are all here for sticking with you and
Support.
sticking with us for this length of time, and I do appreciate all of you, and it certainly speaks well of the support you have, so.
What do you like best about being on the ZBA?
I think the best part of it for me is going around different parts of town. Even though I grew up in the town of Falmouth, there's still, every time I see a different part that I've never been to, roads or obviously properties, but I enjoy that the most, I think.
It's kind of revisiting and getting to know better the community and some of the needs, like?
Yeah,
is that-
I'll see what's before us on the agenda, and I don't even recognize that road. I go out there, oh, okay, this is out here, I didn't.
And what's
Like
the
your
mo-
neck of the woods, North Falmouth, for instance, I find a different road every time.
What's the most difficult part of being on the board, would you say? Of dealing with the issues?
Yeah, obviously difficult issues that pop up that, seeing the people, the applicant, pour their heart out here, but you try to find your way through what you read in the file and what you're hearing on the testimony and, rendering a decision. It's tough.
It's hard to say no?
I wouldn't say hard to say
No.
no, but
Just being straightforward.
yeah.
Other questions from the board?
Brain is
All right,
This interview recently.
pacing out on me.
how would we like to proceed?
I'd make a motion to approve Mr. Haddad for a full voting member with a term expiring 6/30/15.
Second?
Okay, motion and a second to appoint Mr. Haddad to a term expiring June 30, 2015. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Congratulations, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for spending the evening with us.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the recommendations for the articles. The board has to vote these this evening.
We're just voting the recommendations tonight and worrying about the wording of the explanations in the next few days.
That would be my hope, Mr. Vice Chairman, that you and I and Chairman Putnam could...
Sit down and put the
yeah, we could-
explanations
we could
together.
draft the
Yeah.
explanations and then have them ready for the board at your next meeting. So, I would correct that, not to the board at the next meeting, but in the interest of time. Since those explanations do need to be sent out to town meeting, they would be consistent with the board's recommendation this evening.
All right, so, and we have no recommendations for 22, 23, and 24 prepared? Looking at the draft here.
No. You'd, of course, had no report from petitioner Mr. Shearer at the last meeting.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, first, do we have any questions about any of these recommendations? These are the drafts as prepared by the town manager's office for us.
On the ones in which we do have a recommendation explanation, I would move those as recommended with those explanations. So that would be Article 3, Article 4, Article 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. Actually, I guess 29 we need to, or the explanations on the next page.
And then we also have 41, 42, 43, 44, and 45.
Those are all articles that we are actually putting forward. Those are Board of Selectmen articles.
Right, but we have to vote all the recommendations.
Yeah,
Right.
do we get them all?
So-
Yes,
Yeah.
So your motion is to
include all of them.
approve all of these recommendations with the exception of 22, 23, and 24.
Yes.
Okay. Any do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, any discussion on Article 22? Do we have any suggestions, or do we want to recommend indefinite postponement?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Scherer had an opportunity, and then he didn't communicate with the board, or I know he didn't communicate with me since then. I do know that the town moderator really wants a recommendation, so I think the only alternative that we have at this time would be indefinite postponement.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
I'll second it.
Indefinite postponement.
So a motion and a second for indefinite postponement, and I perhaps might add that the explanation could have some wording to the effect of, Mr. Scherer did not, and did we, and I guess the question I have, did we hear back from Mr. Scherer? Was he just unavailable that evening, or do we not know?
I don't recall the specifics of it from
Okay.
a week ago. I know that he was, we did reach out to him as we did to everyone else
Right.
and notify him, but I'll be happy to check into that further.
All right. Well, for the explanation, we could simply say that, the board asked Mr. Scherer for, to present to us, but he was unavailable at the time, and so we had to recommend indefinite postponement, lacking any further information.
Well, I think we could probably come up with reading his petition, I wouldn't support it anyway, and I'm wondering if we can come up with a reason to not support it that isn't simply he didn't show up at our meeting.
Could you,
Well,
I can't remember exactly what it said offhand, and additional reporting, was that something to do with committees, or?
I think it had to do with past overrides. In
Oh,
other
that's
words, where
right,
the
that's
money has been
exactly
spent.
it, yes.
So I think it needed some explanation. It's a broad stroke, I could support it, but it needed some explanation. And I'm surely not prepared. I think with Brent's suggestion, the wording on that would be best served. We know Mr. Scherer will probably make a presentation at town meeting anyways.
Well, I know he was always very concerned about the override for the books for the school, and wanted to know whether or not that $1 million that was on the override, which of course increases every year because of 2.5.
Whether it continues to
Whether
go
it
for what it was
continues to
supposed
go
to.
for the
Right.
original purpose, and he wanted that reported, so I understand that. But, I mean, yeah,
So I make a motion for indefinite postponement with the recommendation that Brent suggests that it was unavailable.
the explanation.
Right, the
yeah.
explanation.
Okay. So motion, we had a second? Okay. So that's Article 22. Any further discussion on that recommendation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Article 23. Mr. Finneran's request for it says additional audit, but I believe this is this was an audit committee, or was that the other one?
Yes, this is Capital Audit Advisory Committee,
Right.
Oversight Committee.
Recommendations? I don't know that I would say that it's a bad article. I guess I would say I like the idea, but I'm wondering how that would fit into what the Finance Committee might already do, if there might be some duplication of effort there.
And now we have a finance director as well. So
Right.
I think, and we have auditors. So I think if there's something, I think information might be there. If someone wanted the information, it probably is available.
Well, remember too, from his presentation, this was a request essentially for a standing committee of sorts that would address capital concerns. And one of the issues that he raised was that he thought that the Capital Advisory Committee, I mean, first of all, the Finance Committee had a Capital Advisory Subcommittee, and then there was the Capital Advisory Committee formed from members of this board, the Finance Committee, and a couple of at-large members. And from Mr. Finneran's presentation, he thought that there should be more at-large members than individuals who had an active role in town government.
If I'm not mistaken, it's 50% plus one.
Exactly.
So I make a motion for indefinite postponement.
Second.
All right, and motion and second. Any suggestions for an explanation as to why?
My personal feeling is with the work the Capital Advisory Committee did, which I thought was a fairly representative committee, and our new finance director, that this is not necessary at this time. And I also feel it's a little unclear as to exactly what the purpose of it is, and if that were more clearly defined, I might be able to support it, but at this point, the way it's written, I couldn't support it with the vagueness of the article.
Okay. Any other feedback? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. And then finally, Article 24, Mr. Finneran is petitioning town meeting to ask the board to have a public comment section.
I think we have to recommend indefinite postponement. We've already voted on this once. Certainly, if the town meeting comes back and tells us to do it, then I think we would follow the will of the town meeting, but I think it would be a little bit confusing to have this article having our recommendation positively, because we could just go ahead and do it.
Or
Point
not
well
do it,
taken.
as the case may be.
Right. I mean, if we voted positively here, why wouldn't we just vote positive as a board? That we don't need,
If we agree, in other words, if we agree with the recommendation, we could just put it on the agenda, say we're going to do it.
Right.
And then it would be a
Right.
moot point.
right.
So is that a motion that you're,
A motion definitely postponement to support the vote that we've already had as a board.
second?
So we have a motion and a second for indefinite postponement. I'm going to buck the trend. I think I still like the idea, so I'm not going to support the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'm opposed. The motion carries 4-1.
Well, it was your idea. I wouldn't expect you to change your mind.
No reason to.
Actually, I like the idea of public comment, if it's done right. And it's not public questions, public comment, because with questions, if somebody asks a question, you can't answer it, so, but with public comment, it can be done. It can be done very well. But the board has to agree to do it, and this board doesn't agree to do it, so we're not going to talk about it until we do. It's a fact of life.
All right. And with that, the individual selectmen's reports.
Oh, well, we have a big report, but we're not doing it tonight. No.
Okay.
Becky and I attended the annual meeting of the Massachusetts Selectmen. It was one of the best meetings I have been to. We talked about the capital advisory, capital planning, and we did a section on evaluating the town manager, which has something really new and different that I think you'd be very interested in. And since the time is coming up in November, I will be happy to bring that to the boards for discussion. But it would, and then the first part of the meeting, I have to tell you, was the best part. We had the superintendent of operations for the Boston Police Department. He's called a chief, and we had the chief of police from the town of Watertown, and they gave us a presentation on Urban Shield training, which is what they did prior to the Boston Marathon bombing, which allowed them to be so successful because of that area-wide training they did with 12 different communities. The city of Boston and all the surrounding communities participated in this really elaborate training that they call Urban Shield. And they were presenting this to the selectmen because of the need for funding police training in this area, for situations like what happened in Boston. And I know on the Cape, you'll be happy to know, that the Chiefs of Police Association here on the Cape has they look at training, that's one of the things they do, and they look at training regionally around the Cape so that police officers from the different departments can participate. And this year, they ran into a shortfall, so the chief of in Truro is the president of this council, Takian. And so he came to the county commissioners and said, we're really kind of desperate. Is there any way you can help us out? So we voted to give them $35,000 so they can finish their training program for this year. But it's not quite the same as Urban Shield, but it's very much like Urban Shield. Mm-hmm. But I thought that was one of the most moving experiences. I know, Becky, you feel the same way, listening to those two chiefs talk about how that training helped them do what they did in Boston. And when you really look at what happened, like the chief in Watertown was saying this, that at night he had these two officers on, and they're like routinely patrolling Watertown, and they get a call, and one goes to the execution of that MIT security officer, Sean Collier, and he goes to this, and they're thinking, what is this about? And then the next call they get is somebody stole a car. You know, that Mercedes that the terrorists, the brothers stole from the gas station. So he's thinking that he's just following up on a stolen car. And then all of a sudden, he's behind them, and they stop dead in the street and get out of the car and start firing at them. I mean, just to hear them talk about this thing was really amazing. People, everyone there stood up at the end and just clapped. It was really impressive. But I can give you more of the details on the town manager, and Becky can go over
I
that.
did the wastewater,
And you did the
and,
wastewater planning?
and then the capital planning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they were both, they
And
were excellent.
She did wastewater, and I did town manager evaluation. It was really, really good.
But I think to add just a little bit more on the two superintendents in the police department, they started out their conversation with the fact of having very little information. And then they went to their preparation, never knowing that anything would come as quickly as it did. And I think as he was going through each step, it was a very simple thing that was happening. And then you had that explosion. And then you had the incident. But they were trained. And it was just incredible that within 6 months, they were using that training.
Yep.
But everything he talked about, in my mind, it was a very simple, everyday thing. And then it just
Until this
blew up.
happened. And then it happened in a sequence at first, because they had all that manpower there at the marathon anyway. But they were ready for something until the explosion. But he also talked about in the training how they pushed the men and women of the police departments to think of every possible thing that could happen in the training. Okay, here we are in this burning building, there are all these people, and there's people firing, shotguns and battles and all this. And he called his staff the evil geniuses. He said he wanted them to think of the worst possible things that could happen so that they could train for those. It was really an impressive presentation.
So we'll have to maybe put something on the agenda to go over some of
and
this
we'll
stuff
bring
in
you
more
some
depth.
materials. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was good.
I just handed something out. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but we've been getting a lot of requests in recent weeks for agenda items, sometimes for things that are questionable. And so I put these thoughts down the other day. I shared them with Julie, and I want to share them with the board in terms of whether or not something should be on the board's agenda. There is, in fact, and there's a young lady out here, Laura Kelly. She's not a resident of Falmouth, but that's what these things are. She is asking to have this on the agenda. And so, if nothing else, I do want to see if the board would like to see about putting this on the agenda for the 21st. But also looking ahead, I'm using, these are sort of the guidelines, if you will, that I'm using to see if we should be putting something on the agenda. And I certainly, any feedback you all have about agenda items, whether we should entertain agenda items, why we should entertain them, trying to follow through with the process. Basically, does it fall under the board's purview? Is it from a resident or taxpayer? I've received, for example, requests to have conversations with folks who don't live in the town of Falmouth. And while I understand some of their concerns, it's sort of indirectly and might address issues within the town, and I have to question whether or not it should be an agenda item or not. So these are the questions that I ask myself when looking at agenda items, and any feedback you all have, I'd appreciate that. And the question for you this evening, because we do have to put it on the agenda for the 21st, or we could, if we wanted to, put it on the agenda for the 21st. Ms. Kelly would like to make a presentation to the board about the Cape Aquifer and the decision by NSTAR to use pesticides.
Well,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm very interested in hearing this, because I think there's this whole wastewater thing right now that we're doing is all about water quality. And the other piece to that is the fertilizer management, which deals with some of the NSTAR issues. But the 21st is that joint workshop. And I'm not
There's
sure
a few
that
things on the agenda, yeah.
that's the right night. We may have to go to the one after that.
Well, just so you know, the public comment period for the NSTAR is going to close on November 4th. So we would have to take it up on the 21st if the board wanted to take some action. And we did this a few years ago with presenting a letter to the state, expressing our concerns about the plan. So, Kevin?
I just have a couple of things to say. Number one is, we get a lot of emails, correspondence from folks representing an organization. The point is the organization them in just a name? Or how big is the group? I'm not making a specific, we're talking in generalities. This is an organization, but we're talking, in the literature, it talks about the founder, and is it an organization of one? Were you a leader of a group of one, or were you a leader of a group of an army, or a vast constituency? We need to make sure that we're not furthering someone's own political agenda on the backs of the people in this community. So anything we do, I first would like to know a little more research specifically about the organizations, whoever they may be, because how long have they been in existence? What is their membership? What does it take to be a member? In other words, is it just somebody, I merely talk to someone and they're part of my membership? The other thing is, if we have someone that comes before us, whether it be this issue, we need some balance. Just today, we got another email from the folks at NSTAR who said they would be happy to discuss with us their spraying. So if we're gonna do something like this, I think we need balance for this board to make an educated decision, not our own personal agenda, but an educated decision about all the facts and how they move, how they think. Again, I'm not drawing a conclusion, but recently we've gotten emails from folks saying, I represent this group, and they're not even from this country, so we have to be very careful about moving forward on those. But if we do, I want to make sure that we have some balance. We don't just make a judgment without knowing the rest of the story. So that's my 2 cents worth there.
Well, I do think there's 3 other towns on the Cape who, and I don't know if they're part of this organization or not, but I mean, they are adverse to the spraying. And I think it's Eastham, and I'm trying to think, it's in that direction. I mean, I get those emails.
If you,
I'm sorry, it's not on the agenda. The question is, do we want to put this on the agenda for the 21st or the 4th? Or do we want to just, we could have a letter drafted like we did with the NOAA and the Albatross. We could have a letter drafted and submit that to the state.
well, I think that we should do something, because when you think, it wasn't long ago that there was a moratorium. NSTAR agreed to a moratorium for a year, and it went on for, I think, 3 years, until they decided that they had to. They have an obligation to keep the vegetation on their easements low or insignificant. Remember, we tried to even get them to use goats.
Right, but before we go
That
too
didn't
much,
work.
before
But
we go
anyway,
too much further, this
no.
isn't on the agenda. So
No,
the
it
question is, do we want to have an agenda item in 2 weeks to get in advance of the closing of public comment on the 4th of November? Do we want to have a special meeting on the 28th? We could always do that. We can schedule another meeting if the board decides. And that's all I'm asking at this point. I don't want to get into too much discussion about the contents of this or the substance of it.
If we have a meeting, I would like some balance, because there is, from what I understand, some misinformation about how it's being done by NSTAR this time versus another time. It's all, I don't know. I'm just saying I want some balance if we do it. And a large, huge amount of time for this is not necessary. If we have a 7 o'clock joint meeting, we can do this at 6:30 and just do it like that.
I like the 6:30.
Yeah, give NSTAR 10 minutes and give the
That's right,
group
the
10
other-
minutes, and
right,
then
and-
decide what course of action we want to take. That's fair. I'm fair.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right. And if we need to, is anyone averse to the idea of meeting on the 28th? Because obviously, this evening's agenda was a little long. I apologize. I try to, judge times, and obviously I wasn't as good of a judge of time this time around. If it looks like the agenda may be long on the 21st, are we agreeable to meeting on the 28th to do this sort of thing.
I don't think our agenda is that long, we really only have the joint meeting. This should be a half an hour issue. Sometimes if we put time limits on things, we stay to a time limit.
That's right. That's why the time
All this
sometimes is
open-ended
important.
stuff really does not give us, compression here. Let's get to the point, let's talk about this so we can
Move
move
it
on.
along.
And I don't think it's beneficial to anybody when
I
we're
don't
put it at
think so.
12.
I think if the time were on there, it would have,
Okay, so if we're going to do this, 10 minutes
that's,
and start,
Well,
10
10
minutes.
So 6:30,
10 minutes for
10
the board
minutes
to
for
make
us.
the
That's enough.
discussion.
Okay,
and then we're done.
all right. All right, well, we'll have our meeting tomorrow, Doug and I with Julian, and we'll look at the agenda and put something together.
okay.
Okay.
All right, and any feedback you have about these questions that I'm asking myself when we put things on the agenda,
Yeah.
I do appreciate it.
I think they're great questions there, too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And sometimes it's just a good idea to email, and is there something, do you want something like this on the agenda?
Any other updates from the board? Any questions about Mr. Suso's report?
Nope. Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn and a second. Is there any objection? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Cavosa Excavating is a family-owned and operated company specializing in the installation of Title V septic systems. Cavosa Excavating is one of the largest septic system installers on Cape Cod. Whether it's upgrading your current system or installing a whole new system, Cavosa Excavating can do the job. Cavosa Excavating, 508-563-5530.